Today we are going to talk about the Ollo Audio S5X headphones. These have been recommended to me on my Discord server. A lot of people really like them. The thing that is unique about those headphones is that they have been targeted at immersive audio production, so particularly at people who are working in Dolby Atmos, for example. The developer claims that the tuning is perfect for binaural audio. And this made me wonder, is there actually such a thing as a perfect tuning for binaural audio, or is this just a gimmick? And I do know that many of you out there are wondering the same thing, because I quite often get questions regarding what headphones should I use if I'm working in immersive audio or binaural audio. And today we're going to answer that question. So are the S5X headphones that you should get, or is this just a gimmick? But first of all, hello everybody. In case you're new here, my name is Michael Wagner. I'm a digital media educator with more than 30 years of experience in higher education. And on this channel, I talk about digital media, game design, and spatial audio. Today about a pair of very interesting headphones. If any of those things interest you, I invite you to subscribe or join our Discord community. Invite link is in the description below, or there's also a QR code here somewhere. Before I get started, I need to make two disclaimers, and the first one is actually a little bit of an unusual one, something that you're not going to hear very often, but something that other reviewers have also pointed out with other headphones from Ollo Audio, and that is that these are actually really good headphones. Now, why am I saying that at the very beginning? The reason is because I'm actually going to say bad things about them. I'm actually going to say very bad things about them. But the thing is that the headphone itself is actually really good, and you can actually see that this is a small company that kind of where somebody put a lot of soul and heart into their production. So these are actually really nice headphones. The problem is in the way they are communicated and the way they are marketed. So be aware, I'm going to say bad things about them, but they are actually really good headphones, and I'm going to remind you about that every once in a while. The second disclaimer is that everything that I'm going to show you today I bought with my own money. So this is not an ad in any way, shape or form. Everything that I'm going to talk about is strictly my own opinion. Nobody had any influence whatsoever. So first of all, what are the Ollo Audio S5X? And I'm not going to go into too much detail, because my feeling is that if you're watching this video, you already know pretty well what those headphones are. But there are headphones that are coming in at about $500 US. Now, if you buy them through Thomann in Germany, you actually get them a little bit cheaper. They come in at 385 pounds. I actually bought them not that long ago, and including shipping, that translated to about $430 US. If you buy them on Amazon, they are currently at 489 plus tax. Now, one thing that is very unique about these headphones is that they come with an individual measurement. So when you buy them, well, first of all, you get like a certificate of authenticity, which shows the serial number, which is nice, and you might actually need that. And then you get sort of a frequency response measurement. You might not be able to see that, but I'm going to come back to that, because that's actually one of the issues that I'm having. And in addition to that, you can purchase what's called a unit-specific calibration file for Waves NX. So if you're a user of one of the virtual mixing environments of Waves that uses the Waves NX head tracker, you can get the file that actually optimizes the experience for the Ollo S5X. Now, the thing about that calibration file is that it is actually quite expensive. If you already have the Ollo Audio S5X, you need to purchase an upgrade. The upgrade comes in at 128 euros. If you purchase everything in a bundle, you can also get that, but that essentially kind of increases the price of the headphones accordingly. So let's first talk about build and comfort, and I'm not going to talk too much about that, because a lot of people have already talked about these things specifically, and I'm going to leave a couple of links in the description below. The overall impression that you get is that these are actually really well built. These are nicely made headphones. It becomes very, very clear that this is not a mass product. This is not coming from some assembly line somewhere. This is actually really built with very high artisan quality, let's call it that way. Now, a lot of people are kind of raving about the comfort of these headphones. I have to say that for me, these are not particularly comfortable. So they are not as comfortable as people usually say. And the reason for that is that I have a very large head. And as a result of that, you know, these headphones, they can't really swivel. So they only swivel in one direction, but not in the other way. But as a result of my large head, these actually kind of put a lot of pressure on my temples. And as somebody who has glasses, this becomes a bit of an issue. Now, they are not uncomfortable. So it's not like they are super uncomfortable or anything, but they are not as super comfortable as other people say, at least not for me. And if you have a large head, you might run into the same issues. So let's first talk about the frequency response measurement that they send you. And you can actually get the data itself if you ask them. So there's a form that you fill out and they will actually send you the Excel spreadsheet that is behind this data. And this is what I have open here. And at first glance, that looks almost perfect. It is very flat. There are just a couple of wiggles, which aren't really that important at all. So it looks perfect. However, the devil is in the detail, and this is where I'm starting to have some issues. And this is actually something that other reviews have also pointed out with previous headphones from Ollo Audio. And that is that this frequency response measurement is compensated to a target curve that is not disclosed. The target curve that they use is called the Ollo Target 2022. It is apparently built on the Grass schema target, but it is customized in one way or the other, and we don't quite know how it is customized. I read somewhere that this is based on measurements of studio headphones that professionals like to use. So it's more of an empirical kind of optimization, but it is not disclosed. And because it is not disclosed, this target curve is actually fairly useless. It doesn't really tell you anything. If I can choose the target curve according to which I'm compensating the measurements of my headphones, I can essentially choose anything and I can make any headphone sound or look flat. And this is certainly not something that is particularly useful. Now, where it gets even worse is the unit-specific calibration file for Waves NX that you can order in addition. And once again, it comes in at 128 euros. I actually did that. And what you get is essentially a little file that you plug into Waves NX. They tell you how to do that. It's not that straightforward. You have to drop it into a folder somewhere. And then Waves NX will recognize the Ollo Audio S5X as an option in their software. Now, the thing is that these unit-specific calibration files are actually short XML files, and you could technically write those yourself if you would just know the actual measurements of the headphones, which you don't because the ones that you get are compensated. So for 128 euros, you get a couple of data points that you should already have because you do have the measurement data. However, the measurement data that you do have is compensated with a target curve that you do not know, and therefore you cannot really use it for that purpose. And this really becomes a problem because you are paying 128 euros for what exactly? And what makes this even worse is the fact that these are actually really good headphones. I need to come back to what I said at the very beginning. The calibration file that you get doesn't really add much information. You're probably not going to hear much of a difference. And so you don't really need that. So let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about sound quality. And I'm only going to talk about subjective sound quality. And I should probably also mention that I'm very sensitive to higher frequencies. This is going to have an impact on the way I review those. But first of all, very briefly, these sound excellent. Now, in order to give you some understanding on how they sound compared to other headphones, I've decided to take two other pairs of headphones that I own that are in about the same price range and compare them to those. And the headphones that I'm going to use for a comparison are, first of all, the Neumann NDH30. These are absolutely excellent headphones that a lot of mastering engineers like. They're currently coming in, they're a little bit more expensive, so they're currently coming in at 538 British pounds at Thomann. On Amazon, they are $649. And then the second pair that I'm going to use are the Biodynamic DT1990 Pro. Those are currently coming in at 429 British pounds on Thomann, and on Amazon they are $529 US. Now, the DT1990 Pro are known to be very bright, so they have a bump at the higher frequencies, which is good for analytical listening, so they're really, really good for that. However, for somebody like me who is sensitive to high frequencies, I usually cannot listen to them for prolonged periods of time. After about an hour or so, I get fatigued and I have to take them off. They're not really headphones that I like. Now, the NDH30, by contrast, are a little bit more mid-forward, so they are not as dominant at the higher frequencies, and they also extend further in the low end. At least that's my impression. I'm hearing things on those headphones that I'm not able to hear on any other headphones. They have a very, very, very good bass extension. And most importantly, they're also super comfortable. These are actually the most comfortable headphones that I've ever owned, at least from a studio side. They are more comfortable, fun headphones, but from a studio perspective, these are actually super, super comfortable. And the way I would characterize the Ollo Audio S5X is as somewhere in between. So they are bright, but not as bright as the DT1990. And they are a little bit better on the low end, but nowhere near as good as the NDH30. So some have characterized this as slightly colored, and that is probably because essentially the high end is taken down a bit, but it's still kind of higher as flat, and then the low end is kind of upped a bit. At least that's the impression that I'm getting. So the kind of you get a little bit almost unnoticeable V-shaped, at least some color. Let's put it that way. So considering that they're actually cheaper than the other headphones here, this is actually a good pair of headphones. So there's nothing wrong with that. Now, personally, I still very much prefer the Neumann ADH30. To me, these sound perfect. If I would characterize the perfect target profile for me, it would be that frequency response. But, these are not bad, considering they are 200 or 300 bucks cheaper. But this is not why you're here. You're here because you wanted to know if the Ollo Audio S5X are headphones that are good for immersive audio. And in order to find that out, what I did over the last couple of days, I did a little bit of a test and I listened to all three of those headphones in an immersive setting. The way I did this is with the trick that I showed in one of my previous videos, link in the description below, where I used Apple Music in order to play Dolby Atmos music and then essentially output that to 7.1.4 and through a loopback device send that into a binaural renderer and then monitor the output of that binaural renderer. If you want to know exactly on how I did that, let me know and I'm going to do a video about it. But essentially what I did is I listened to a binaural render of Dolby Atmos music. And I did that in two different ways. First of all, I did that standard, so kind of the way you would normally listen to that. And then I also added a head tracker that would essentially track my head and would try to see if there's any difference in how these headphones perform with respect to head tracking. So what are my impressions? Now, bringing it down to the very basics, I have to say that the Ollo Audio S5X performed better than the DT9090 Pro, but honestly speaking, nowhere nearly as good as the Neumann NDH30. And in order to give you some idea of what I'm talking about, I listened to a track by Talking Heads, Psycho Killer. And at the beginning of Psycho Killer, there is this bass line, and this bass line is positioned slightly in front of you. And with the DT1990, I could not really identify where that bass line was. So it was in my head. It sounded okay, it sounded perfect, to be perfectly honest, but it was not really, I couldn't really localize it that well. With the Ollo Audio S5X, I had some idea where the bassline was. It was kind of in front of me, but kind of not really very, very clear. With the NDH30, however, I could locate it exactly. So for me personally, this might be because of the better bass extension that the NDH30 has, but I felt that the result that I'm getting from the NDH30 are a lot more spacious, a lot more clearly defined. The positions are a lot clearer. The Ollo Audio S5X came in as a clear second. They were not as good as the NDH30, but they are still very, very good. The biodynamic DT9090 Pro were okay, so there was nothing wrong with that, but they were not nearly as good as the other two. Now, the quality difference became really clear once I switched over to classical music and I listened to a couple of tracks on the classical Dolby Atmos playlist in Apple Music. And in particular, one track, which was a Rachmaninoff piece, and I actually had played that piece myself 35 years ago. And that kind of took me back a bit, to be perfectly honest. Now, in case you're wondering, I don't play anymore. I have stopped playing the piano quite some time, but I'm actually trained in classical piano. But when I heard that on the NDH30, it was like sitting there. It almost brought me to tears, to be perfectly honest, how perfect it was. In particular with head tracking. The head tracking, and a lot of people don't really realize that, works really well if you have set it up correctly. And now, even though the NDH30 were the best in that respect, I still got a very good impression from the Ollo Audio S5X. So they were still perfect. And even the DT1990 were okay. They did sound a little bit artificial, to be perfectly honest. So it didn't really sound as natural as you would get with the NDH30. But they sounded okay. So in essence, essentially all of them are pretty okay. However, if I would rank them in terms of performance with respect to immersive audio, I would clearly say that the Neumann NDH30 were clearly the best, closely followed by the Ollo Audio S5X and the DT9090 Pro. Now, in order to find out if you actually need to go with higher-end headphones if you want to work with immersive audio, I also did a test with the Audio-Technica M50X. These are very popular, reasonably priced studio headphones, closed back. And I have to say that they also worked. I mean, the impression that you're getting with headphones like these are not nearly as good as with the other ones. But you can still pinpoint where everything is. So it's kind of still immersive. Everything is a little bit smaller. Everything is not as natural as with the others, but they do work. While there is a clear difference between the more expensive headphones that I used and these ones, they were all functional, at least. So in conclusion, are the Ollo Audio S5X good headphones for immersive audio production or Dolby Atmos? And the answer to the question is yes, they are. Now, they are not nearly as comfortable as people claim, at least not for my head. Once again, a lot of pressure here on my temples. But they're not uncomfortable, and I didn't have any issues wearing them for longer periods of time. Now, they did sound significantly better, at least to my ears, than the Biodynamic DT1990 Pro. Which are more expensive, which is interesting, but they didn't really sound nearly as good as the NDH30. For me personally, these were kind of the best ones. Now, I did not test anything that was more expensive. I'm pretty sure that if you go higher up the quality ladder, for example, the Focal Clear or something like that, you might find better headphones. But at that price range, around $500, I think nothing beats the Neumann NDH30. Couple of negative things. Well, first of all, I do believe the marketing language around immersive audio is a little bit of a gimmick. These are just good headphones. There's nothing wrong with that. And they don't perform any better in immersive audio than other headphones. I'm not quite sure why they try to focus on that area. Maybe this is something to be cool, but quite frankly, these are just good headphones, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, the frequency response graph is a little bit of an annoyance. Yes, it is flat, but show me the target curve. I don't know why it is flat. Okay, it doesn't really give me a lot of useful information. And if you're considering purchasing that, definitely stay away from the unit-specific calibration file for Waves and X. That doesn't really give you much and costs 128 euros, which is a lot of money for not much information. And then there's one final thing, and that has to do with the headband itself. If you're working with a head tracker, like I did, mounting a head tracker on those headphones is a bit of an issue. The Waves and X head tracker was a little fiddly, and that is because this is a very, very wide headband, and essentially it has this empty space in between. So it makes it really, really difficult to mount a head tracker on those headphones, which is unfortunate because, once again, if you are kind of targeting immersive audio production, at least make it so that people can easily mount a head tracker on those headphones. So with that being said, what are good headphones for immersive audio production? So let's say you are new to immersive audio and you want to know what headphones you should choose if you want to get into immersive audio. And the answer to that is very, very simple. Choose a pair of headphones that, first of all, are good headphones just by themselves, and then choose headphones that are really, really good in terms of sound staging and imaging. Headphones that already give you a good three-dimensional impression when listening to stereo will always be better for immersive audio than headphones that don't have that kind of 3D impression. The claim that you can tune headphones in such a way that they're better for binaural, I think, is a gimmick. And I would like to hear your opinion about that. I don't think frequency response makes any difference whatsoever. I'm not quite sure why it should, but I'm willing to learn. So if you have any additional information about that, let me know. But I personally think it's a gimmick. Important is the sound staging, the imaging, the 3D impression that you get, and that should be the most important decision factor for purchasing headphones. And if you don't have the money to purchase any more expensive headphones, can you use your current headphones for immersive audio production? And the answer to that is clearly yes. The Audio-Technica M50X were perfectly fine. They were not as good as the others. Everything was a little smaller, but you need to learn how to translate how immersive audio sounds in these headphones to the real world. And once you do that, you can just work with them perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with those. Once again, if you have the money, go with higher end headphones. But if you don't, these are fine. One final comment, and that is with respect to head tracking. If you want to get into immersive audio and you are considering working with headphones, you definitely should get a head tracker. And the reason for that is that even in the best binaural mix, you will have a hard time understanding where exactly the head speakers are. In my testing, it was impossible to really identify if the front head speakers are in the front or in the back. That was not something that I could hear out of the regular binaural down mix. However, once you take the head tracker, then essentially just by moving your head, you get an understanding about where everything is. So this becomes really, really important. Now, once again, this is not a replacement for an Atmos Studio. If I do have an Atmos Studio, that's always the better option. But if you don't have an Atmos Studio because you cannot you do not have the space or you cannot afford it, then this is the second best option, and it's definitely workable, and it will definitely allow you to do stuff in 3 dimensions. So this is really everything I wanted to say today. Thanks again for watching my videos. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please use the comment section below or join our Discord community. Embed link is in the description below. And with that being said, see you at the next video.